Peter opened the door and welcomed me in. And of course, he was in the nude. And he said, our house is clothing optional.
When everything is going your way, she wants to be close at hand. She moves to some other doorway when things don't go the way she planned. Yes, she's a star. She only ain't with me, young celebrity. Yes, she's a star.
I'd like to welcome to the MonkeesPad today, Ann Moses, the former editor of Tiger Beat magazine. Any monkey fan will be familiar with her face and her writings. She has a new book called Meow, My Groovy Life with Tiger Beat's Teen Idols.
You got it right.
So, Ann, when did you first enter the picture? I think it's right at the very beginning, at the Last Train to Clarksville promotional tour.
I remembered every moment of Last Train to Clarksville. They just made it such a fun day. And actually seeing the Monkees jump out of the helicopters and then play their music, it was just, I knew this was going to be the big one.
How long had you been working for the Laufer Company, Tiger Beat magazine, at that point when you first met the Monkees?
It was about 9 months, because that was September of '66, and I went to work in January of '66. So I was still getting my feet wet in the way of all the work I was doing, but there was no question that the Monkees were going to be huge.
Now, were you a big Beatles fan? What had been your experience with pop groups up to that point when you started?
Well, I think I was fans of all the typical teenage stuff of my time. I can remember, seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan and seeing their picture in Life magazine and talking with my girlfriends about their long hair. We all just thought that was the coolest thing. And at the time, boys did not like the Beatles. They were like jealous and they put them down. And of course, everyone became fans of the Beatles. It was just a great experience for me. And I hadn't looked beyond that at that time, because I had been accepted at San Jose State to continue my education and get my last 2 years of my bachelor's degree in journalism. And that was my plan until I think it was a press party for Dave Clark 5. And one of the girls at that who was with me, she said, "Oh, I'd like to go to work for Tiger Beat and get paid to do what we're doing." And I thought, that's a cool idea, although I did not know what Tiger Beat was. I was your typical college student, and I was all wrapped up in my studies and my life in Anaheim, and I'd never seen Tiger Beat. So I got a copy, and it was like, oh yeah, this would be way cool. Every time I'd go out for something or have some experience, I'd say, well, why don't we do this kind of story? Or what if I did this interview with so-and-so? And they just go, yeah, because literally they had been publishing the magazine just from information they could gather sitting in the office. And they had a fictional person that wrote articles for Tiger Beat because they wanted to establish that they were in Hollywood. And so this fake teenager, her name was Sandy Demings, and it was really Ralph Binner or Lottie Powell, whichever one would write whatever story it was. It was by her, and it always said age 16. So here I was 19 years old. And so I started to fill that void of the fictional Sandy Deming. And before long, it was me it was by Ann Moses. They would put my picture with whoever I interviewed. And in very short order, I just kind of took over that role, and I was getting more responsibility all the time. So when we got the invitation to the last train to Clarksville, it's like it was a Sunday. No big deal. I was down at Union Station and was able to participate in that super fun day. So that was the start of Monkey Mania.
Most of your reportage, so to speak, was done on the set of the television series, at least in the beginning, correct?
Yes, yes. Once, because Chuck Lawford, the publisher, had contracted with Screen Gems, all I would need to do to go out on the set would be to call Marilyn Schlossberg and say, "May I come out this day?" And she'd go, "Sure," because I would generally talk to the guys, between shots, or if they didn't have a shot for a while, we'd just go in their dressing room and do that. And it just became routine, although the routine was always fun when it had to do with the Monkees, because they were always on, meaning they were behind the scenes. They would joke with one another, and I'd see them ad lib in some of the episodes. I would find out that it was a much more casual set than some of the other TV shows I ended up going to, like Land of the Giants or Batman and Robin. They did what they felt like doing. When something would come into their mind, it would be, they'd try that out, and half the time the director would say, "That's a take." The Monkees were just like no one else. And so those times on the set, it really gave me a chance to just see all the creativity that came out of these four extremely talented young men.
Well, it sounds like you really kind of had an exclusive relationship with them, but there was another rival magazine, particularly at the time, called 16. Were they breathing down your neck? And what was your experience, with the other rival teen magazines at the time? Teen Scoop, Teen Screen, Teen Set?
To me, there wasn't competition, because I was just so laser focused on doing what I did. I would occasionally, see other magazine writers at, like, press parties, or, when they release a record and have a party or something like that. But I didn't feel that competition. And I had already encountered Gloria Stavers, who was the editor of 16, when I'd been on tour with the Raiders and Dino, Desi, and Billy just the month before, in August of 66. And that turned out to be very strange, because Roger Hart came up to me and he said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, but Derek booked Gloria Stavers to come in until we're going down to Miami." And he said, "So you just hang in the background." And so I was really kind of incensed, because here I was supposed to be with them for a week, and I was being told, "Oh, well, you ride along with them in the bus, but don't take pictures, and now's this time for Gloria to take pictures." And I was just kind of livid. And then I got the word from her when I got on the bus the next morning. She said, "Now that I'm here, I better not see you take that camera out of the bag, or you're in trouble." And, so I just walked to the back of the bus, hung out with Dino, Dizzy, and Billy, and whatever. But then by the second day, I would get calls from Fang or Mark or, Harpo, and they'd say, "Hey, come on over. We're shaving before the show. You can take pictures." And so I'd get all these dressing room pictures. Or Mark would say, "Hey, I'll meet you by that palm tree over there, and we'll get some portrait shots." And so they basically had my back and were arranging for me to continue to shoot pictures.
So they
So
were kind of assisting you covertly behind her back. They were kind of.
I was
Yeah.
very covert, and I was like, what the heck? What are they going to do to me? That was kind of the, what can she do to me?
You had the hometown advantage being
Definitely,
3,000 miles away in New York, so you had that going for you.
definitely did. And then within a matter of months, I was writing a weekly column for the New Musical Express in the UK. So what happened there is the NME expected me to cover their stars when they'd come to Hollywood. So, I mean, the Yardbirds came out when Jimmy Page was with the Yardbirds, groups like that. And that at that point, like my two jobs combined, because like Dave Clark and Jimmy Page, they'd say, can you get us on the Monkees set? Because they knew I was out there all the time. And I would say, yeah, I can. And so I'd call up, I'd make the arrangements. And so when Jimmy Page, when he went out to the set, I mean, he was just like gaga. And it was so cool. He just had so much fun watching the show. And so that was a different one. He was just a fan. And of course, that made the Monkees just feel so good because they, the first year they were fighting the battle of, do they play their instruments? Are they really musicians? And here, a musician that they admired from the UK was excited about them. So it was very validating and made them feel really good.
Well, as we know, the Monkees were four very disparate personalities. Why don't you give me kind of a thumbnail look at each personality as you grew to know them?
Well, I felt like Davy, kind of the first day I went out the set, I got the impression that Davy was like the ambassador. He was the one, he was very comfortable in show business. That having that Broadway experience just made it like home for Davy. And so he could put in any professional performance that you needed, and he would ad lib with the rest of them just like crazy. But he was so comfortable because he was just in his element completely. And he was always super nice to me and just seemed like he cared about people. It just came through even when you first met him, how genuine he was. And then Peter, as I got to know Peter, he treated me with such respect as if I were a peer. And in a way I was. But, to me, I'm the new girl at the magazine. I've been there less than a year. But he's treating me like this has been my profession for years. And still, I'm 19 years old at this point. But I think Peter was rewarded in that when we would talk about whatever it was with him, whether he was doing yoga and he was talking about the Book of Tao, I would write it as he would tell me these stories. It wasn't like I'd go, well, we're not putting that in Tiger Beat, because as I was getting to know the real Peter, then so were the readers. And that was my goal. And so he was always just a very considerate, thoughtful person, and a pleasure to be around.
And they would read these articles and give you feedback later, right? They'd say, well, look what you wrote about me.
Like I would take out, I just came across an article that I had written about a day on the set with Peter. I said, hey guys, here's the newest Monkee Spectacular. And Peter's looking through it and he goes, you spelled this wrong. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, I'll correct it, and he found a couple of other, whether it was a typo or some word I'd gotten wrong, but I wouldn't let it happen twice. It was like correcting your essay for the teacher. It's like, oh, well, he's not going to catch me in a mistake again. So it made it really fun. And of course, he didn't do it in a mean way. It's just that, hey, we were talking about a serious subject and you made a mistake. And that was Peter. Now, Mickey, I wasn't really close with Mickey because I would call Mickey the gadfly of the group. He just seemed like a perpetual motion machine. He was always moving. He loved being kind of the clown of the set. He would say things and do things just to get a laugh from whoever was around. And always in a good mood though. I can't remember ever seeing Mickey like in a down mood at all. And I have no idea if that was what they were presenting when I was hanging around, but I hung around enough that I don't think they could fake it. So I think over time I really got to know each of them as they really are. And then there's Michael Nesmith. At first, Michael was just as excited about this new wondrous thing that was happening to them, just as much as the other guys. And so he would certainly be cooperative, and he would do whatever we asked, and he didn't grumble. But within a matter of months, I think he had more of a feeling for what was happening in the way of them becoming teen idols and pop stars. And I guess for him, he realized that wasn't the real him, that he wanted to be making serious music. And even though, a lot of us thought they were making amazing music, of course, Mike had his own ideas about that. So we got to the point where he just said, why don't you talk to my wife? She'll do that interview for me. For me, I couldn't have been happier because Phyllis and I would go to lunch probably once every, I don't know, couple of months. And we would just sit there for 2 hours, two women close to the same age. And she was very just open, down to earth. It wasn't like interviewing a celebrity. And she just didn't seem to be intimidated. And so we probably found out so much more about Mike and the inner Mike than we ever would have asking him to talk about himself. So I treasured those times because she was just such a lovely lady.
And at one point in October of 1967, you had a different exchange with Michael.
Yes. See, that was, they had been at it for about a year. And so one day I was out on the set because we had to produce Monkey Talk every month. That was a feature that ran in Monkey Spectacular. And it was Mike talking, Mickey talking, so on and so forth. And what we'd do is do an interview about a certain topic. And at one point, he was just, he'd try and avoid me. And finally, he just said, well, if you'll ball me, like that was the word he used. And of course, I knew what that meant. And he said, if you'll do that, I'll do the interview. I can't even tell you how I actually responded to that. But obviously it didn't happen. And, I went on from there.
And he finally did spend some serious time with you later on during the set of Head, correct? Or thereabouts?
That is correct. We were out on the set, and I had been interviewing Mickey and Peter, just sitting around on the grass in between shots. And then Michael came over and he said, "Why don't you go to lunch with me today?" And I thought, okay. So we went in his Jeep, went to this restaurant. I know during lunch he had about three, scotches, whiskeys, I don't know, some brown liquor. I asked him, "Why have you been giving me such a hard time?" I said, "What did I ever do to you?" And basically he explained that he felt like he wanted to challenge me, make me be a better writer by writing about more serious things. In other words, he wanted me to behave how he wanted to be written about, was my impression. And it was like, well, it doesn't really work that way. The readers are interested in the things we write about. I don't know, it was almost like saying you should be a legitimate writer. And to my mind, I was doing exactly what I should be doing. So it's not like I took it as criticism. It did really help me to understand why the last year had gone on and he'd made it difficult. But at the same time, I was so grateful to have had that time with Phyllis that I wasn't feeling badly about anything.
Describe the Monkees phenomenon at the beginning and how it changed by that point, like during the end of the second season. What changes did you observe occur?
All these years later, with all the hindsight we have, I realized they were having conflicts about the music, probably about many more things. And I never saw that when I was around them. They weren't displaying that at any time in front of me. So I had no idea that anyone was talking about leaving the group, changing anything. We knew when the series had been canceled, and that was a major bummer. At first, I think they were all so grateful to be working. And, they had all been trying to work in show business. And the Monkees certainly launched them into superstardom. But then the conflict of four personalities, four talents, all unique to each one, they couldn't stay together and be happy. And I just thought it was really sad because they had been such a revelation to Tiger Beat readers, to anybody who fell in the Monkees, watching them on TV. I mean, there had been nothing like it before. Well, yes, help from the Beatles, but nothing on a weekly basis at home, watching on your TV, and your mom and dad are not yelling at you to shut it off. Peter did a story with me when he quit and told me why. And do I know if he was being honest with me? I don't know, but it was the story that he wanted to put out, and he had been so open and honest the whole time. I didn't think anything about it. And then our role changed. I mean, that was just about the time that we were ending Monkey Spectacular, because unfortunately, when they weren't being seen on TV weekly, and yes, everybody's excited because they're going to do a TV special or whatever the case is, but that doesn't keep you at number one, like going into people's homes every week and then again during reruns so they can see them again, since we didn't have VCRs or DVRs. it was like you welcomed rerun season to get to see it again.
What was your boss Chuck Laufer like? Did he like the Monkees personally? Did he kind of give you carte blanche to do what you wanted to do? And what were some of the things he came up with to stoke the fires with sales in the magazine? I remember all those ads for Davy Love Beads and offshoot magazines and sunglasses, things like that. Were those his creation?
Yes. And Chuck Laufer, I mean, he saw the potential because he was allowed to see the pilot and lock up those contracts before their show even aired. And it didn't matter if Chuck Laufer liked the Monkees or didn't like the Monkees. I mean, he was savvy enough and he saw what it meant for him. He, his brain started working. And so to Chuck, I think where I saw these cute guys that I knew were going to, be loved by girls over the world, Chuck saw all our signs. He was singularly focused. And so because he had done the licensing things, and I can't imagine that selling the licensing for totally unknown quantity at that point would have been very expensive. It was anything that he could market with the Monkees name, charge $1, and then charge 25 cents for rush handling. And of course, the 25 cents for rush handling, while a genius marketing tip, we didn't really ship things out rush handling. But just for those of you who sent in your quarter, the girls in the mail room would tell me he would come in, run his arms through the big bucket of quarters and go, I love rush handling. And, I can't even tell you how many quarters would come in every day.
Similar to Mike's wife, Phyllis, you also did some articles and so forth on Samantha. Did you get to know her as well?
Samantha Dolance was an absolute doll. You would expect that she would be, just in my mind, just like Hollywood, that she had been around. And yet she was just this sweet British girl. She was great. When we would have contest winners come to town, we would say, we're bringing them over to your shop, and she would give them the grand tour. And that was, that was just exciting to our contest winner. Maybe not as exciting as, meeting the Monkees or whoever they were in Hollywood to see, but she had become a celebrity at that point when she opened her shop, One of a Kind, and did the beautiful crochet. Just a lovely woman.
Did you ever go to their homes? What were their homes like at the time?
We did a series on the houses they lived in, and I never did go to Mickey's house. We had pictures in his, backyard deck from their wedding, but I had never been inside. Now, I had been to Peter's place and found the Davy stickers on the wall, put up by in fact, I took a picture of Steve Stills standing next to and he had put the Davy stickers up, and he had put it in all the little stickers, so they spelled Davy, and that was on the wall at Peter's house. So I always thought that was really cute. But he lived very, he had thrift store coffee tables and things like that. It's not like it was fancy and elegant. Now, Mike's house was a totally another story. He and Phyllis looked for quite a while. And then the house they bought up on a beautiful hill in Bel Air, they completely remodeled with all kinds of interesting gizmos and gadgets. And I'm sure Mike had as much fun building and decorating that house, or remodeling it and decorating it, as Phyllis did. And of course, theirs was more luxurious, although it wasn't stuffy. It was really comfortable and, lovely play area for Christian and Jonathan. And, it was great. And then Davy's house went to a number of times. And of course, we did an at home with Davy. So we stood with a picture of his Union Jack tray and other things around the house. And again, his house was just really comfortable. His home, it seemed very much like a family home. And of course, then when Talia came along and we would do photo shoots with Linda and Talia and Davy, then they were just it was so lovely to see them together and interacting. Linda was also a gem. So I just had so many incredible experiences over those few years.
Do you recall the at the Nesmith home, the kind of indoor-outdoor swimming pool that actually went into the living room and extended to the backyard?
I do. It was really, certainly I'd never seen anything like it. I mean, I'd been to Lucille Ball's house and seen their pool out in the backyard and everything, but I don't think I had ever seen an indoor-outdoor pool, and that was a big deal.
You mentioned Peter quitting. Let's go back to that day when you went over at the house and did your interview, your exclusive story about why Peter left the Monkees.
By this time, he was with Rain, and they got a place in the valley, had a nice pool. But when I went to the door, Peter opened the door and welcomed me in. And of course, he was in the nude. And he said, our house is clothing optional. If you'd like to, disrobe, or I don't know what the word he used, but he said, if you'd like to join us, you're welcome to. But there was a mixture there at the house. There were some people with clothes on and some people with clothes off, and they were jumping in the pool. It was not something that fazed me in the slightest. So you just got to learn to look him in the eye.
Did he seem relieved? Did he seem like a load had been lifted off his shoulders? Was he concerned? What was his demeanor? Do you remember?
He was very mellow. I mean, at that point in time, and I know he had struggles afterward because he had bought his contract out. But at that point in time, he just seemed comfortable in his skin. And he was talking about, the new group. And he just seemed to be, yes, unburdened, I think I would say at that point. He was the chill Peter that you sometimes would see, just like he had just gotten up from meditating and he was as chill as he could be. And it seemed very natural for him.
When the show was canceled, it was pretty obvious pretty quickly that the circulation was decreasing and the Monkees were not going to be the same phenomenon that they had been even 6 months earlier. How did the magazine react to that? Was it a, what are we going to do now moment, or what did you start doing to shift focus?
Monkee fans were still craving more information. They weren't finished by any stretch. So we felt an obligation to do some, but at the same time, this was just about the time that Bobby Sherman was starring in Here Come the Brides. So then the tables kind of turned and we went on to the next really big fave. But we never let the Monkees drop completely, because they were the ones that, for all intents and purposes, kind of started the whole fave thing.
There was quite a bit of marijuana and things like that. Did you observe that, or were you ever in the infamous black box? I think you mentioned Peter tried to engage you in some things a couple of times. What was your
Well,
experience with that?
I was never invited into the black box. I didn't know about the black box until I read whose ever autobiography that was in. And it was like,
that's hard to imagine.
I know. And I mean, I really tried to be observant when I was out on the set, but I was also really focused. So, and I wasn't there like an investigative reporter who was out to get the big scoop for the Inquirer. So it wasn't like I was looking around for dirt or anything else. And I mean, we would not have ever printed that in the magazine had I, you know, been invited in or knew anything about it. I mean, we absolutely would never have printed anything about it. But often when I would interview Peter, he would tell me, you know, I really want you to try LSD. And I'd tell him, oh, I'm afraid I'll have a bad trip. And he goes, no, I'll take care of you. I'll make sure you have a good trip. It's such a great experience. And I was always really too chicken. I was just afraid of, well, what if I'm really out of control and I freak out? And so I never took him up on his offer. And then when we had our reunion in 2017, I said, Peter, do you remember when you used to get me to try LSD? And he said, oh, Annie, you didn't miss a thing. And, you know, after all the experiences that he had been through, it was that same kind of looking out for me type approach. It was like, oh, it's just as well you didn't. And he was still being that kind of mentor to me. And it was so touching. I just couldn't believe it after all those years. And still, there was that closeness there. It was a really, really wonderful moment that I'm so, so glad I got to experience before he passed away.
Now, Michael was touring with them at that point. How was your reunion with him?
Well, I didn't have one because I had talked to Andrew Sandoval. He said, I don't think Mike's going to talk to you. And I said, well, you know, I'll make it quick. Let's just, you know, for a minute. And who's coming, sneaking by us on one side, coming out the door, leaving the theater, but Mike Ness. So we caught a picture of him anyway, but I just thought that's hilarious. And then I went ahead and I went into the room where some of the people were meeting Mickey. And, you know, Mickey didn't remember me at all, but I reminded him, you know, Tiger Beat. And then it was like, oh, yeah. But I mean, he's the first to admit that he doesn't remember, you know, he's forgotten many things about those times.
I was there and was told I had a good time. That's his standard line.
There you go. So it's like, so I wasn't offended. I said, let's just get a picture. No big deal.
Tell me about the concerts that you went to see. You saw them at the Cow Palace in early '67 and Hollywood Bowl and Houston. So you saw a couple live shows and traveled with them in between, I would assume, between the hotel and the venue.
Well, when we flew up to San Francisco, they invited me along. It was their first live show. And I did ride in the limo with Davy. And we put one picture of that in my Meow column, but it kind of got chopped off. But that first concert it just blew me away because I had seen them lip syncing and I'd been to a recording session, but that is nothing like seeing them interact live, playing their instruments and just putting on such a fabulous show. I mean, come on, they brought that TV show to life for their audiences. I mean, they would goof around on stage, but then you'd hear their individual voices. And, you know, a lot of times people will ask me, could you really hear them? Well, yeah, girls were screaming, but yes, you could hear them. And they were so amazing. And really, they were putting up those big screens behind them, and that hadn't been done in any big way before. I mean, whoever bought tickets to the Monkees shows definitely got their monkeys worth, their money's worth.
That too.
That too. Their monkeys worth and their money's worth.
Now, at
Definitely.
the Hollywood Bowl show, Mickey took a jump and leap into the pool area there in front of the stage. You remember that?
And he gave me a heads up beforehand that he was going to do that. So we had our photographer right in the right spot. I know Henry Diltz got shots of it too, but our photographer was shooting it for us and got the great shot of him hitting the water. And I think I was the only person in the audience that knew it was going to happen. And it did not disappoint. It was awesome. And just the perfect ending to what their show was like. It was just, you'd see things you didn't expect, and that made it twice as good.
Now, Davy was married to Linda Haynes during that era, but it was never formally revealed until months and months later. What do you remember of that?
Just that I was not keeping tabs on them. I mean, we knew that Linda lived at Davy's house. There were times I went up there before they were married and she was living with him. I mean, that just was as common as could be. It was just no big deal. So I got to know her in that process. But I didn't quiz them about, are you really married? Are you going to get married? It didn't need to be discussed because we weren't going to make a big issue about Linda living with David. That wouldn't have benefited him, or it wouldn't have sold more Tiger Beats, because that's not what they were buying Tiger Beat for, was to find out dirt on them. And so then when Linda was pregnant with Talia, it was like, well, when the baby's born, let's do a photo shoot. And they cooperated beautifully, so that they let us share those pictures and the three of them together. And I love that, the time when we were covering that, because Davy just seemed like a great father. He was hands-on, and not something you saw in Michael Nesmith. I mean, I have no idea how close Michael was with his sons in their private time, but because I got to observe, Davy with Talia, it's like he seemed to be on top of the world.
Well, when Mike's other son was born, you kind of did an article kind of cloaking the sentiments of some of the people at Tiger Beat.
It was common knowledge on the set that Mike was fooling around. And I can't tell you specifically how we knew that, but it was known. And I did not know the person that he was the baby daddy, the woman he was with. But we just knew this was going on. And so, we weren't going to write anything nasty in Tiger Beat. We weren't going to say, this is what's going on behind the scenes. But Lottie, who had been, cheated on by her first husband and divorced, she just felt like she could be the one that would write the story of a cheater. But it was totally cloaked in Tiger Beat speak. And the title of the story was Christian Asks, Where's My Daddy? And it was about how Mike's gone on the road all the time and he's recording, and Christian is feeling alone at home, the little toddler. And it was just, I think I've been asked, well, did Michael see that? And it's like highly unlikely. he was not looking in teen magazines when they'd come out every month. But it was so we could have some internal ha-has. And Lottie, it was very cathartic for Lottie to write that story.
So at one point, they did start making a motion picture called Head.
Mhm.
I know you didn't go to the premiere, but did you see the film in the theater, and what was your reaction?
I did see the movie. I really didn't like it because, unlike the Monkees themselves, I thought what they did was superb, meaning their TV show and all that. I think their albums were superb. And here they were, make this stoner movie, and it it just made no sense to me. In fact, I was transcribing an update with Davy the other day, and he goes, "No, I don't understand it, but I think it's cool." And it's like, okay, well, I'm about in the same place. I don't understand it, and I know they were trying to get these messages across, and I really hope it was worthwhile to all the Monkee fans then. I certainly don't begrudge them if they love it as a cult movie or just marking that moment in time. But personally, I was not a fan of the movie.
Do you remember other people's reactions at the time, similar to yourself?
Yes. I mean, I don't think it made sense to a lot of people. And it was like, why would they do this? Isn't this just like sealing the coffin? But from their perspective, is like, we're going to have our say if it's the last thing we do.
And it
So
just about was the last thing.
I know. But then when they started having reunions as the Monkees, I mean, come on. I know they tried to lose their images as Monkees, but it's what made them. And then that they could go back and make so many people so happy all the years of reunion touring. I just, I'm sorry if it wasn't, emotionally uh, fulfilling for them, but it certainly made a lot of people happy.
Well, from the movie, they made a television special, a one-off television special. Do you remember that at all? Or you
I
weren't
do.
there, right?
That was way more fun, I think. Once they were off the air all the time, we had to be filling the magazine with, other faves.
Our next judge is an editor of a magazine, and she's probably one of the prettiest editors that you'll ever meet. From Tiger Beat magazine, Miss Ann Moses. What's happening in the world of Tiger Beat?
Oh, all kinds of exciting things, especially in the new contest we have coming up next
New
month,
contest?
which some lucky person out there is going to be able to come to Hollywood to spend the whole week with Bobby Sherman.
Wait a minute. They get to spend the whole week with Bobby Sherman night and day?
Just days, Mark.
Just days, oh.
Now, they did continue after Peter Tork left during the conclusion of the filming of the television special. They did go on for about a year as a trio. Did you have any insight into that?
I know there are updates throughout those years. Michael's doing this, Mickey's doing that, and we would do a 1 or 2 page story trying to keep the readers updated, but it didn't go beyond that. I mean, we had done all their life stories, we had done all the baby pictures, we had done just about everything there was to do. So at that point in time, it's not like I was saying, let's sit down and have a 2-hour interview, because I don't know what we talk about for that amount of time. But we tried to keep them alive in the magazine. It's just that they didn't do that much.
Did you keep in touch with them at all after that 70s, 80s, 90s?
I didn't keep in touch with anyone after I left Tiger Beat. I didn't have any contact at all.
So after your about 6 years with the magazine, what made you decide to move on and leave it behind? And what did you do?
Well, we moved to new offices. We moved from 1800 North Highland to Hollywood Boulevard. Once we moved in and got all settled, then I was in Ralph's office one day and he said, I'm getting a new desk. Do you want my desk? Well, his desk was a big, beautiful wooden desk. In his desk drawer, when I started to fill things, I found a list, and it was a list of salaries. And I had been there for 6 years. I was the editor of their flagship magazine, the magazine that was providing the bread and butter for everything else Chuck was doing. So I'm looking at this list and I see that Lottie and I are making about the same. And I see that the brand new male editor of Rona Barrett's Hollywood is making twice my salary. I think I left work early that day, which I rarely did. I was so mad and so upset. I just had to get out of there. I had to get home. Well, then, of course, I got home. And by that time, I was married to my first husband. He was very jealous of my position at Tiger Beat. And he was jealous of me going to cocktail parties for new records or openings of shows. And even though he was always invited along, he had no interest in it, and he didn't like me going. He liked me to be at home. And so he really jumped on it and said, okay, they're not going to treat you that way. You should quit. And I guess it was a combination of how livid I was that was happening behind my back and the injustice of it, that he had me, and I bought into it. And the next day I went in and I told Ralph I was quitting. And Ralph said, what's wrong? What's, why? And I told him, and he said, yeah, but he's married and has a kid. And it was like, so what? So he said, we'll double your salary. We don't want you to go. You're doing a great job. And I just said, I have to. And that's what happened. And that's why I left. So he said, well, I think that was in like January. And he said, just wait till March, because you will have qualified for your pension and profit sharing. Because unbeknownst to me, they had set up a profit sharing plan, and I'd had no idea. And it was a considerable amount of money back in those days that I had made just since the 5 years that it had been in effect. And he said, so March, it'll be your anniversary, so you're eligible for that. It was just a combination of factors that led me to quit the greatest job I had ever had, and the greatest job I ever will have had in my lifetime.
What did Chuck have to say?
He was never involved. He was never involved. I wish he'd come and pleaded his case or something and said, are you sure about what you're doing? If they had given me a harder sell the day I quit, I think it would have made me think more about it. But instead, first husband got his way, and I think we moved in May up to Northern California, and it's just how it went down.
I'm just surprised that Chuck heard that, Ann Moses quit her job and didn't come running after you to talk about it in any way, shape, or form.
Me as well. Me as well. Especially because Ralph said, we'll double your salary tomorrow. No question, don't worry about it. And I mean, that was a lot of money. That would have been like $2,400 a month. And, my father, the bank manager, was making $1,000 a month. And he had been with the bank for 25 years. So it's just how it went down. And I cannot look at it with regret because of what would happen down the road. All the right things would fall into place. And I've just had my best life ever for the last 42 years.
Let's talk about Genie the Tailor a little bit. This is somebody who was a figurehead in the Hollywood scene, the music scene. She made all the custom clothes for just about a who's who of the music business at that point. Could you tell me a little bit about her? Because not much is known, but she sure was an important part of the scene back then, and she did die tragically early on.
Oh my God, that's so true. I met Genie. Genie showed up at my office one day. It was within that first year. And Genie said, I have this idea. I want to write this goofy column and it's going to be so much fun. And if you met Genie, you couldn't refuse her. She was, I think she was about 4 or 5 years older than I was. She had lived in New York. She had done some acting. She was just this, outgoing, hilarious person, just self-deprecating, and just made you want to hug her as soon as you knew her. And I said, I'll tell you what, you write me up one and I'll see if that's something we can use in Tiger Beat. I can't make you any promises. Well, she wrote up her first Genie in Groovy Land. And oh my God, she was the funniest writer. And she kind of fictionalized her. She was doing faction, where she'd talk about the facts that, yes, she was making new costumes for the cow sills or something. But then she'd make it fantasy. And then, it was creative writing. It was so much fun. It couldn't have been more perfect in Tiger Beat. And of course, I got to know her personally. She was such a confident woman that you didn't, women weren't that assertive back then. And she was not aggressive, but she was assertive. And in general, women weren't that way then. And so it was just such a comfort to observe her and learn from her. I introduced my mom to her. And then when she was making the Raiders white costumes, my mom drove up from Anaheim every day and was working on the costumes with her because she was a great seamstress. And it's just, and then the grand opening of her store next to the Troubadour, and then the terrible accident. I mean, she had such an incredibly bright future, but was cut short.
What happened?
Well, she was with her boyfriend, who was with the Fairport Convention, I think was the group name. And I've been told that there was an accident in the van and she had a necklace on that got caught on the door handle, and that she died from that, not the accident itself, but her boyfriend was killed as well. So I don't know what, it was a pretty horrific traffic accident. And so
what was her last name? Because they always said Genie the Tailor. What was her?
Oh, it's Genie Franklin. And it's spelled Jeannie, but she went by Genie, Genie, like the genie in the bottle.
Right. What are some of the people that she designed clothes for? You mentioned a few, but it was really everybody. Do you remember any
Well,
of
I mean, I think Peter Tork was the first of the Monkees. I think she made Mickey some things, outfits for Ginger Baker, and fell in love with him. Eric Clapton, and this is when they first came over to the States early on. And he asked Genie out to dinner, and she invited me along. And I don't know why, because Jeannie was a much more polished woman than I was, and she could converse with anybody in the whole world. So I don't quite understand it, but she invited me along, and we just had a lovely time. She really loved men. She appreciated men and was not embarrassed by it or anything else. She connected with so many people. It was no big surprise. I think she went with Ginger Baker for a while, and then some of the other people, the Sundowners who toured with the Monkees, I think.
Yes.
She did their costumes, and she did the new white uh, jackets and tights for the Raiders. And then by the time she had opened her store, I know Raquel Welch came in and bought one of her dresses. And it was the dress she had named the slut dress because it had little cap sleeve and it was very short. And it was almost like a little sheath. There's not a lot to it. I mean, today it would be exactly like the fashions today, very body hugging. But back then she called it the slut dress, and Raquel Welch had to have one. And of course she looked great in it. And it's just, there was so much life in Jeannie. It was truly sad that she didn't. I can't even imagine what would have come in the coming years.
Yes, I always got that notion myself. Well, thank you for that because, not much is known about her, and I thought it was a fitting
Oh
time to
yes.
maybe do a little tribute to her. Let's talk a little bit about David. I know you said you hadn't really kept in touch with him. What was your feelings or reaction or reflections when you heard that he passed away?
Oh my God. It was uh, just like Peter. I was gobsmacked. Uh, I couldn't believe it. I was driving to work when I heard it on the radio, and I mean, I had no words. And when I got to work, I said to my closest friend there, I said, one of my very close friends died. And she said, well, who? And I said, well, I don't know if you know him, but Davy Jones. And she said, she was a millennial, so it was kind of like, who? And I explained, and she said, oh, I think I have heard of them. But it was at that point they began to talk about, well, we want to see your pictures, because I had never told them about my Hollywood days. And they said, well, bring in your picture book. So Davy's passing actually turned out to set in motion the things that would get me to start my blog, write some of the old stories, and then I can make this into a book. And so that Davy's passing was the impetus for that. I guess it's my way of saying the glass is always half full, because I am a really optimistic person, but I I was especially crushed because I had not ever instigated a reunion. And that's why when the Monkees came to town the very next time after that, it's like, I've got to go see them. And luckily, I connected with Andrew, and now Andrew and I are friends. So, I mean, a lot of really good things came out of it, but it is just so tragic when because it was so sudden and because he was so alive, the days preceding his heart attack. And it's just like, how is this possible?
I saw him 11 days before he passed away.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I was in the audience watching him carry on.
I know. It's like when someone has made an impression upon your life, that never goes away. And Davy was absolutely one of those people.
I don't want him to ever be forgotten.
No.
Give me your assessment of the Monkees. It's been 50 years now, over 50 years since they came on the scene, and we're still talking about them. How do you feel about that, and what are you surprised?
I'm not surprised that the Monkees are as popular today. I don't know if you can use the word as. I'm not sure they have the same number of fans all these years later. But they have a tremendous amount of fans that have loved them the whole time. And now those fans are being rewarded. I mean, their shows now, it just absolutely takes you back to 66 and 67 when you see them on stage. There's no age, Mike's lost some hair and Mickey wears a hat because he's self-conscious about his hair or lack thereof. And it's like that doesn't even cross your mind when you're watching their show. It's like you're right back where you were. So I'm sitting there watching the show and I'm 19 years old. And somebody next to me, maybe they were 6 years old. It's like we enjoy it to the exact same degree. And that right there capsulizes what the Monkees created and what kind of longevity it has. It's just a testament to all the things they did right and the beautiful music they made. Maybe it didn't make Mike Nesmith happy every time, or so-and-so who didn't get to sing on that one. But from a fan's perspective, from the other side, they did everything right until they broke up.
I agree. Do you have any particular fondness or memories about any particular songs or any of the music? Or did anything, any outstanding thoughts of any of the songs or music that you remember?
Just the one. I was at the recording studios and I was there seeing someone else, but the Monkees were recording in another studio, and Chip Douglas saw me out in the hall and he said, "Annie Moses, can you come help us out?" And I go, "Help you out with what?" Because I got kicked out of 5th grade choir because I couldn't carry a tune. And ever since then, I knew better than to sing or do anything musical because that wasn't in my genes. And he said, "Well, I want you to clap on this record." So I went in there, he taught us how to clap. And it was either, I don't know, I can never keep it straight if it was Daydream Believer or I think it was I'm a Believer. And anyway,
it wouldn't have been I'm a Believer. That was produced by somebody else.
Okay.
It might have been.
It was a Daydream Believer.
It might have been Daydream Believer, or She Hangs Out, maybe something like that.
No, it was Daydream Believer.
Okay.
But he had to teach us this special clap. It wasn't just, keep time to the music. It was clap, 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 clap. And to this day, I can be in Sprouts Market going down the aisle and they're playing that song and I can hear my clapping.
No kidding.
That was a big deal. It's like, I'm on this record. Woo.
All right, Ann. Well, thanks so much for coming to the Monkees Pad and visiting with us. Again, the book is Meow: My Groovy Life with Tiger Beat's Teen Idols by Ann Moses and with Ann Wicker.
You can get an ebook or a paperback via Amazon.com,
Right.
and they can get autographed copies of the paperback from annmoses.com, which is my website,
Mm-hmm.
and they're available.
All right. Well, I hope we fire up some sales here.
Me too.
That's the
But
idea. You're a
it's
wonderful
been
guest.
fun regardless, and I appreciate you including me, and it's just so nice to think back to those days because they were the glory days, and so it always feels good to revisit those times.
Well, that's why we have the Monkees Pad here to remind people and
Right
to
on.
get stories of the people that were there because we weren't there.
Well, I
Thanks.
hope we fill in some blanks for you.
Thank
Okay.
you so
Thanks
much.
so much.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You'll never leave me behind. I love you, baby, baby, love you everywhere. Take me with you.